Hello, everybody. This is Fireknight here, and welcome to the Week 8, 9, or whichever one these are now at this point. I can't even remember. Welcome to this week's NFL predictions. First thing to address, I forgot to mention in my last video that last week I went 6-9. I went negative in my predictions. This week I went 9-4. I only got 4 incorrect. And they were the Bears and Vikings game. That was very surprising how that actually turned out. The Jets and Browns game. I was really hoping the Browns could get win number 1 there, but you can't always be right. And the final game that I had incorrectly called was the second to last game, I should say, that I incorrectly called was the Lions and Texans game. I wasn't expecting the Texans to win. And the fourth game I got incorrect was the Redskins-Bengals tie in London. The reason why I consider that a negative when they are ties is because I did not predict them to go into a tie. So I got it wrong, no matter what. And as you've also noticed, I'm using a different music bed this time around because, gotta keep things fresh. It's the NFL theme song. I don't know for one specific. It could be for Fox or CBS. I can't remember, but just know that that's not mine. I'm just kind of using it just to start things up, but it's all there, stuff no matter what happens. So anyhow, due to all that, these are going to be my predictions for week 9 and out to the playoffs. So first team we're going to look at is the Arizona Cardinals. I believe will go 3-12-1. They didn't show that much consistency at all on the field up against the Panthers. They were able to manage something towards the end to at least increase their score, but they couldn't come back. And now they're on a bye, so we're not going to be able to see any more from them. And by the time they come back in week 10 against the 49ers, I think the 49ers could beat them. And from that point on, I don't think they're going to see another win this season. So that being the case, I just don't see the Cardinals getting a positive result at the end of this season. They're already off to a very slow start. So, I just can't really say much for the Cardinals, and we'll just leave the bed out of this, the music bed out of this for now. So from that point, next up would be the Baltimore Ravens. I still believe that they will go 3-13. I believe those 3 wins they had at the beginning of the season are the only wins they're going to see. They have a very difficult, and I mean very difficult schedule ahead of them. The only time that they would have a chance to prove me wrong, as far as I know, would be week 10 up against the Browns. And I'm just kind of predicting the Browns, at the same time kind of hoping the Browns can get their first win there. Maybe their only win of the season, if that's what it ends up being. But no real way to tell that at the moment. But other than that game, every other game the Ravens have, it's way too tough competition for them to be able to make it back into the season as far as I'm concerned. Next up would be the Buffalo Bills. Now, last week I had the Bills going into the playoffs with a 10-6 record, and I still believe them to go 10-6 this season. But it doesn't look like it's going to be enough to put them into the playoffs, especially if McCoy stays out for long. If Watkins isn't ready until week 12 like they said he would. And all of that, plus the fact that they just got Harvin back. It's really questionable how Harvin's going to be for this team, and he could be a real good help. And with all those factors, even with all 3 of them in the team, I still think that they would come out with the exact same result of the 10-6. The only 2 losses they would be facing from this point on would be against the Raiders and Steelers, from what I'm predicting. The only thing that I can say about the Bills is the fact that I don't think they're going to make the playoffs because I think there's going to be more competition in the AFC than I had previously thought. And despite everything, we'll just find out during the season if they can make playoffs. I kind of think they will, but due to my predictions, it doesn't seem so, but I can always be proven wrong. Next up, Carolina Panthers. I believe will go 5-11. They have a few more wins under their belt, but they're not keeping their offense consistent. They can show up to a game, it looks like at the moment, but they can't stay in that game. Um, like they can't really finish out. And at the moment, they're on a bye, or they're not on a bye. They're actually going to be going up against the Rams. Sorry, I'm looking a little too far down. They're going up against the Rams next. That should be a win, and that should be a way to give them more confidence. But I just don't see them being playoff worthy at all this season. I'm still not seeing it with them. Next up would be the Chicago Bears. Now, this was a team I predicted to go 1-15 because of all the injuries they had. After that win against the Vikings and the fact that the whole team basically looked very healthy and very strong, Danny Trevathan was playing well. Jay Cutler looked like a pro football player. Between Jeffrey and Howard, but Howard especially on the ground. Whew. Yeah, the Bears are on bye this week, so there's no way to really evaluate them from this point on. I still think they're not going to make the playoffs, but I do see them getting maybe a few more wins this season now that I saw that kind of improvement with them. But we'll see. Next up, Cincinnati Bengals. I have them going 8-7-1. That's still positive, but it's not positive enough to make the playoffs, especially with the AFC, the way that a lot of the teams in that conference is playing. I don't think the Bengals are going to be able to manage. They have more wins under their belt. I can promise you that much, but it's not going to be enough to put them in the playoffs this time around. The little streak that they have of 14 straight playoff seasons is going to break this season, I'm sure of it. Alright, next up, Cleveland Browns. I can only predict one win with this team, and that's up against the Ravens. Even with the addition of Jamie Collins from the Patriots, it's nowhere going to be enough. Even with Josh McCown looking as good of a quarterback as he is, it's not going to be enough. Even if they pull the multi-quarterback offense between him and potentially with Pryor, not going to be enough. The Browns look like they will, in fact, more likely again be the weakest team in the NFL, period. And if they don't get that win in Week 10 up against the Ravens, I can't see them getting any other win up against any other team in their schedule, except maybe on Thanksgiving weekend, the New York Giants, but that's all I can say. So there's that. Next up, Detroit Lions. I see them going 6-10. That was a weird loss to the Texans. I wasn't expecting that out of them. As a matter of fact, last week I had them going into the playoffs. And after that loss, the offense didn't look strong at all. And their defense was almost not there. So I can't say that they have more wins under their belt at the moment, but or that many more wins, I should say. Unless they prove me wrong, especially up against the Vikings. If they can beat the Vikings in Week 9, that could definitely change my mind about them. But that's a mystery that's going to have to wait. Next up, Houston Texans, another 6-10 team. They're currently going into bye, so there's no way to really see how they're going to fare after their win up against Detroit. But I don't see them getting another one except up against Jacksonville. But other than that, they have a tough schedule ahead of them. They're just still not a very well formulated team at the moment. So we have to really wait it out with these guys. But where a lot of analysts are predicting these guys to go into the playoffs, I said this last week, I don't think they're going to be the number one team in the AFC South. I think that's going to be another team, and I will get to them when I do. In the meantime, next up, Indianapolis Colts, 6-10. I don't see them going into the playoffs because there's absolutely no consistency with this team no matter what. If the offense is not producing, their defense is definitely not helping. There's really nothing there. So until I see an improvement with this team on either side of the ball, I can't give them any more wins than I have now. Jacksonville Jaguars, I can only see at 3-13. They have 2 wins under their belt, and I only see one more coming off of Houston very later in the season. But Jacksonville is just going to have another disappointing season, sorry to say. They just don't have a defense. Their offense struggles. Their offense can move the ball sometimes, but it still struggles too much. And when you look at the numbers Blake Bortles put up, if you had him in your fantasy team, you were happy. If you were a Jacksonville Jaguars fan, you were unhappy. It's weird. So they need to improve, especially on defense, to stop other teams from scoring. If they can do that, they have a better record ahead of them. But Week 9 up against the Chiefs will definitely be a show if they can even hold their own. Next up, Los Angeles Rams. I believe will go 7-9. They're coming off their bye week and they're going up against the Panthers. I don't think they're going to get the win here because the Panthers are starting to improve a bit. Excuse me. And after that showing up against the Giants in London, if they manage to improve things and if they even manage to beat the Panthers, they definitely have at least a neutral, but more than likely a positive coming out if they can. If they don't, my predictions will basically stay the same with them unless I see them being even worse. But time will tell. Next up, Miami Dolphins. Another team that I believe will go positive with a 10-6 record that won't make the playoffs. Why? This team actually is showing a lot of improvement now. I mean, the run game became strong. Serious noise. But now, the way the AFC is, they're really going to have to push themselves in order to potentially land a spot in the wild card round. If they cannot, they won't see the playoffs, but they will still be considered a pretty strong team if they can stay the way they are at the moment. Next up, the New Orleans Saints I see going 10-6, but not making the playoffs because this team is still one of the strongest teams when it comes to offense, but their defense is still not good. It's not the worst, but it's not good. And not good is not enough for the NFL. So, that being the case, the Saints, positive year, but not enough for playoffs. Next up, New York Giants, I believe to go 6-10 to basically be the weakest team in the NFC East. We got that win up against the Rams, but look at our next two opponents. There's no way we're going to be beating those two teams, especially with the Eagles and their pass rush defense. It's not going to be possible for us. So, as far as I'm concerned, with the tough schedule we have ahead of us, it's not going to be a positive year for us. Plain and simple. Next up, New York Jets, I believe are going to be 4-12. They looked okay up against the Browns, but here's the problem. They were almost beat by the only team that doesn't have a win this season. I was almost right with that one. If it wasn't for that interception that was forced, thanks to their pass rush, that one time that they may have needed it, if it wasn't for that, they would have lost that game. Cleveland can show up to a game, they just need to be able to finish it, and I believe that's a fatigue problem. As for the Jets, they don't have formula. They need that in order to be a threatening team, but especially with the absence of Eric Decker, that's not going to happen. So as far as I'm considered, negative year for the Jets. Next up, San Diego Chargers, I believe to go 8-8, neutral. I did have them predicted to be higher, but after the loss that they had up against the Broncos, I'm starting to think, I probably gave them a little too much credit after their win over the Falcons. But with them, it's kind of a mystery. They are a strong team, and if you had to rank them, you could without question say that the Chargers are the perfect middle team. They can beat anybody that's weak, and they can compete with anybody that's strong. They themselves are strong, but they can't keep that flow, apparently. If they can, maybe they can get a positive year, maybe make the playoffs. That's all up in the air at the moment because of the way this team is playing. Next up, the San Francisco 49ers, I believe, will only come out of the season with a 2-14 record. I believe the only other win that they're going to get is up against the Cardinals. And if they don't beat them, they're not beating any other team or schedule, period. Weird thing. This team right now, at the moment, has only one win, and that was a shutout. Very odd. Anyhow, next up on the list is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which I believe will go 3-13. The 3 wins they have is all they're going to get, just like the Ravens. This is a seriously inconsistent team, and despite the fact that they did in fact go into overtime up against the Raiders, which is considered a very strong team at the moment, Buccaneers are just not consistent. That's all there is to it. These guys know how to lose. They can fight, but they don't know how to win yet. So until there's improvement on that team, I can't say they're going to be positive, period. And finally, before we get into the teams that I believe will make it to the playoffs, we have the Washington Redskins, who I believe will end the season 8-7-1. That is technically positive, but not positive enough in order to make the wild card, especially considering the division that they are in. So, sorry, Redskins fan, but unless I see some improvement in Week 10 up against the Vikings because they're going on bye, it's going to be tough for me to say that they're going to be threatening enough team in order to make it back to the playoffs this year. So, now that that's done, let's go directly to wild card round. And, of course, as usual, we'll go to the teams that I believe will lose in that round. First up, the Denver Broncos, I believe, will be the third team out of the AFC West to make the playoffs. They will have an 11-5 record because their defense has been consistent day in, day out. Their offense has been the one thing that's been preventing them from being that much more threatening of a team because they're working with a rookie with Simeon. But nonetheless, they are doing well enough that I believe they'll make the playoffs, but I believe that they will in fact lose to their division rival, the Kansas City Chiefs. Next up will be the Minnesota Vikings, who I believe will, instead of being the number 1 team in the NFC North, I now think will be the second best team in the NFC North with a 12-4 record. That loss to Chicago really hurt the reputation they were holding. The loss to Philly was understandable. Chicago wasn't. Maybe Chicago is very inspired by the World Series, who knows. But anyway, that being the case, I think that in the wildcard round, they're going to go up against Philly again, and they're going to lose to Philly again. Because Sam Bradford really didn't show consistency. His pocket was destroyed every time. Until they can improve that, this is a team that is playoff bound without question, but not ready to move on in the playoffs. Next up, we have the Seattle Seahawks, which, oddly enough, I believe will be the one negative team with a negative record of 7-8-1, despite that being the only team from the NFC West to make it to the playoffs, of course being the best in their division. But I don't see them beating the Packers. Why? Well, simply put, Seattle used to be feared for their defense, and their offense was pretty strong. After that game up against the Cardinals in Week 7, and the close loss that they had up against the New Orleans Saints, it doesn't look like their offense is as strong as it used to be. Their defense is definitely suffering, and I believe that they may end up going up against the Packers in the wildcard round and end up losing because of those specific reasons, especially because of their offense. They need help there. And then finally, we have the Tennessee Titans, who I believe will have a neutral score of 8-8, but because of that in their division, they'll be the one good enough team in order to make the playoffs, other than the Seahawks, by being number 1 team in the AFC South. But look at who would be their first opponent, according to my predictions, if that's the case. The Steelers. No way Tennessee is beating them. No way. As a matter of fact, if I had to choose one team they could potentially beat out of every team that I have predicted to go into the playoffs, the one team I would think Tennessee would have a chance at, but won't be able to fight due to conference conflict, would be the Seahawks. So because of that, Tennessee Titans are playoff bound, just not moving on from there. Next up, divisional matchups. I believe the Green Bay Packers are actually going to be able to get their revenge on the Atlanta Falcons. I believe the Falcons will be the number one team hands down with a 13-3 record for the NFC South and to have the second seed bye in the wildcard round. They come out in the divisionals up against the Packers, and I think the Packers are going to get the revenge. That was a very close game. The one that they just had in Week 8. If these two face off again, I can guarantee you Green Bay is not going to let them beat them again. So next up would be the Kansas City Chiefs, who I believe would lose to the number one seed in the AFC, which would be the New England Patriots. The Chiefs are strong all the way around. Whether it's Alex Smith or apparently Nick Foles, it doesn't matter apparently. That team is a very strong team on every side of the ball. Their only problem up against the Patriots would be, well, one, it's the Patriots. Secondly, their offense can work, but it's weird how they tend to operate. If it's up against a team like the Colts, they can dominate. But if it's a team like the Steelers, a strong team like that one, then the Chiefs have a problem. So I can't say that they would be able to beat the Patriots in that case. So 11-5 for the Chiefs, being the second team out of the AFC West, but not good enough in order to make it. Next up would be the Oakland Raiders. I would believe that they would be the second best team in the AFC, being the best team out of the AFC West, getting the second seed bye, but then immediately lose to the Steelers. Why? Well, it's the Steelers. These guys never take the playoffs as a joke. And no matter who they have on the field, they got way too many weapons on offense. Oakland defense is not going to be able to stop Ben, Brown, Coates, James, Bell, Williams. There's too many. There's simply too many. And that being the case, that and their defense is, as far as I'm considered, still good when they're focused. No way the Raiders are going to be able to beat them. And finally, the Philadelphia Eagles, I believe, will... and by the way, I believe the Raiders will be 13-3. The Eagles, I believe, will come out 10-6. The only 10-6 team that I have listed here that I believe will make the playoffs, but that's because they're in the NFC as opposed to the AFC, where we see a lot more of those. But anyhow, I believe the Eagles will be the second best team out of the NFC East, but lose to their division rivals, the Dallas Cowboys. Why? Look at what happened in that overtime game. If they stick with Prescott, they definitely have a shot at making the playoffs and beating the Eagles when that time comes. And if they happen to have to switch to Romo at any point, even he, I think, would be enough in order to beat the Eagles, without question. So, there's that. Next up would be the conference matchups. First off, I would believe the Green Bay Packers would lose to the Cowboys a second time, simply because of what I just said with the Eagles. I mean, the Packers' defense is great. Their offense is actually struggling a little bit. Not too much, but it is. Dallas's defense needs improvement, but as far as their offense is super strong. And when your offense is strong enough to get you points after points, and your defense can keep the team from at least just to nothing more than kicking, I mean, Dallas can improve their defense. But at the moment, the way they stand, I think they're good enough in order to beat the Packers and knock the Packers out, despite them having a 13-3 record and becoming the number one team in the NFC North. Next up, the Steelers, who I believe will be 12-4, being number one team in the AFC North. I don't think they're going to beat the Patriots, despite everything I complimented them with just now up against the Raiders. No way they're beating the Patriots. The Patriots are way too perfectly formulated of a team everywhere, even outside of the field. They're perfect, basically. No way the Steelers are going to be able to beat them, without question. Patriots got this. And that leaves us to the predicted Super Bowl in Houston. I believe it's going to be a fight of the number 1 seeds. It's going to be the Cowboys with a 15-1, and the Patriots also 15-1. I believe those two will make the Super Bowl. It'll be a very close, very exciting game, but in the end, like I said, perfect formulation, the Patriots would win. I'm sticking with that prediction until I see something big happen with the Patriots. Until then, this is a Patriots year, I can promise you. That being the case, those are my predictions for Week 9. This is Fireknight 3 signing out.